So, apparently, according to research, and this was done by a professor in Malaysia, it's based on Malaysian context. And because now we know in all countries, almost all countries, now we need 2 paychecks to sustain a household. And because of that, sometimes parents are too busy. They don't have time for their kids, to raise their kids. And sometimes daycares are too expensive. Do you know how much daycares are in your country? Do you know how much daycares are? I think a couple of thousand for half a day in big cities like Maryland. And when I was working at a company in Maryland, many of my colleagues, they use their parents as help when they were working in the company. And some, their spouse, the other spouse is a professor. There are many universities around Baltimore. Hopkins is one of them. U of Maryland, main campus and branch campus are not too far. U of Baltimore, among other things. So one of their spouse is a professor. And their spouse would arrange their schedule in a way that when the other spouse is working at the company, they will not go to class during the daytime. They schedule their class time after 5, after dinners. That's how they get by. Even if they are both highly educated with at least a master's, they still feel that daycare is too expensive. If their parents is nearby, sometimes parents help out. If not, this is how they operate. So here are the benefits of grandparenting. They trust their own parents, whether it's from the mom side or the dad side, doesn't matter. It's more trustworthy than a paid caregiver for the kids, a paid babysitter, almost like a stranger. So, added security. And grandkids can bond with grandparents. And yeah, added security in here because of trust. And sometimes people are more inclined to trust their relative, grandparents, or their own parents, especially during COVID. Because they are more familiar with their health history, medical history, another reason. And it's more convenient, it's more flexible. In terms of talking about the hours, when to send the kids over, when are they available and whatnot. And grandparents, sometimes they may live nearby. And because grandparents and grandkids are from different generations, and I bet this applies to all countries. So grandparents may tell stories of their childhood, stories about their own parents, stories about things happen in their generation. And the grandkids may learn the traditions, culture, and values in those generations. Sometimes it helps the grandkids to bond better with the grandparents. These are the pros. What are the cons? Grandparents may spoil the grandkids. We pamper the grandkids. And sometimes, because they are from different generations, it may cause intergenerational conflicts. especially when the child is a teenager or when they're a bit bigger in late adolescence. They may argue with the grandparents. When in those age, their friends have more influence in their life. Sometimes the grandkids may clash with the grandparents. And sometimes it's hard to monitor the internet time or the time spent on different social media platforms of grandkids, especially if grandparents are not tech-savvy. And we know in this generation, grandkids can always hide behind an app. It's hard for grandparents to check. It's also hard for parents to check. But sometimes grandparents, when they retire or when they are at that stage in their life, they have more time on their hands. Their kids live home, they are adults, and they retire. So they have time to learn all these apps, all these technologies, all these gadgets, how they function. You never know. So in some instances, technological gap may not exist. And because maybe grandparents, they've been to school decades ago. And the way they learn things, the way their school is or was structured was very different from how grandkids learn things nowadays. And because of that, if the grandkids is in elementary school or middle school or high school, grandparents cannot help with their homework. Grandkids may have to fend for themselves. And grandparents, some of them may not be familiar with remote learning. Or sometimes it's not remote learning. Things go back to normal. But some teachers still record their lessons and post it somewhere. It still happens in schools in Malaysia. And grandparents may not know how to navigate those platforms. They cannot help their grandkids with their schoolwork. This is another downside of grandparenting. It can be tiring for grandparents. This is where the caregiver stress comes in. Grandparents, they are not young. They are beyond middle age. It can be taxing on them. So any question?